Hello, welcome our first seconds into this live stream. This is I Need Living Conversations 119 session. I'm with Sacred Blue Heron Women who is in Indianola, Oklahoma. I'm Julian Catari in Jalapa, Veracruz. And this 119th session is titled Freedom is All or Nothing. Freedom is all or nothing. Are we in or are we out? And this seemed a little off right off how do you say, right off the hand, like right off the top. Seems a little bit black and white, but we're going to explain. Sacred Blue Heron Woman is going to explain what this means. Right? It's not just being black and white and are you in or out kind of thing. No. There's an explanation why you can't just be partially free.
Right.
So here we go then, and today we're also celebrating her birthday.
Yeah. Or my death day, and we'll be talking about that.
Okay. So take it off with this flight to freedom. Take us to freedom.
So we all think we're free, but we're actually not free at all. And there is no such thing as partial liberation. No one can be economically free while being sexually repressed and bifurcated. No one can be sexually liberated while being an economic slave. No one can enjoy mental freedom while the body's labor and sexuality are exploited and conditioned by oppression. No one can be free while normalizing the abnormal. No one is free while living a normalized, dry, cruel life, which we all live, or most of us. No one can be free while waging war on something. And think about how many wars we're waging. A war on diabetes, a war on drugs, a war on this, a war on that. So no one is free while waging war.
Mm-hmm.
In the instinctive psyche, the wild woman looks out on the forest and sees a home for herself, all her fellow humans, and her more than human life world, while others look at the same forest and see timber waging war on the trees to turn them into money in their pockets. This is not freedom. No one can be free while someone's waging war on timber. No one can be free while waging war on the barred owls to bring peace to the spotted owls. That's what the Forest Service in the Pacific Northwest is. They want to kill nearly 500,000 barred owls over the next 30 years. So that because they say they're killing the spotted owls, no one can be free while waging war on the barred owls to bring peace to the spotted owls. It doesn't work like that. That's not freedom for anyone. So the ability to live and let live so that all can live is true freedom. So that all can live in plenitude is true freedom.
Mm-hmm.
So the only time any of us are ever truly free is when we're in utero. The clamping and cutting of the cord is what ends our freedom, and that is a fact that all courtrooms operate on today. So it's time for all of us to wake up and realize that there are people dictating our lives and we don't even know it. And it's time to wake up and realize that we're not a creation of man. So in Neolithic Europe and Asia Minor, in the era between 7000 BC and 3000 BC, religion focused on the wheel of life and its cyclical turning, which would be birth, nurturing, growth, death, and regeneration, as well as crop cultivation and the raising of animals were the focus. Time moved in circles, not in a terminating line like we do live today. This was an era when women and men cooperated in equality, creating a handmade or crafted life and worshiping together. The sky god Zeus was introduced by invaders called Aryans by some historians, and Zeus's busy priests remade mythologies into a dominating war god, father god. The transition from matriarchal to patriarchal organization seems to have come about in Mesopotamia through the political social revolt of the queen's consort. She traditionally conferred executive powers on him by allowing him to adopt her names, robes, and sacred instruments and regalia. For example, there was a widespread custom of the king wearing artificial breasts and long robes, acting as a sacred agent of the goddess. The crown on his head was the crown of birth, and we're going to talk. There's more about this crowning. This crown was the crown of birth from the goddess, and babies are said to crown at birth, right? A lot more to that. Well, the new patriarchal deities of the Bronze Age, like Yahweh, as secular political usurpers of sacred power, need human beings to be under strict psychic control. As gods, they wanted to, and still do, hoard the agriculturally created abundance of Great Mother Earth for themselves. They're ruling royal, priestly, and military classes, so they have erected gods as police to uphold the stories of taboos designed to keep paupers from the sacred garden. And in their eyes, we're all paupers. They created jealous gods who promised punishment to any mortals who dared to share in the old epiphanies. So the ruling class patriarchal religions no longer invite participation. They demand following. They demand obedience, a fearful obedience which keeps us dependent on their hierarchical punishment and reward systems for our lives. How did this happen? Well, there's lots of his noisy story that we won't cover tonight. We'll simply skip forward to the Trinity, or the triple crown of Baal, also known as the papal tiara. Incidentally, Baal or Baal means owner, master, or lord. So now to November 18, 1302, and we've talked about this, but we're going over it again, and we're going to go over it and over it again until people understand this. November 18, 1302, Pope Boniface and his cohorts came up with the papal bull, the Unam Sanctum, which means one holy church. They decided with this papal bull that God gave the earth to Adam, and Adam gave it to his kids, and so on through the ages till Jesus gave it to Peter, who then passed it on to Pope Boniface VIII. So he, Pope Boniface VIII, pronounced himself the vicar or representative of Christ on earth and claimed that he was the global trustee of everything. He made himself the king of the world, and this is the last line of the Unam Sanctum. Furthermore, we declare, we proclaim, we define that it is absolutely necessary for salvation that every human creature be subject to the Roman pontiff. The Unam Sanctum was in effect so from 1302 until October 31, 2011. No one else talks about this fact that these papal bulls are all no longer in effect. This papal bull laid the ground. This was the first trust, and it laid the ground for the Sesta KV trust that would follow, that would claim everything from man, even his soul. So moving on to January 8, 1455, the papal bull, the Romanus Pontifex, created the first crown of crown land. Pope Boniface VIII was the first leader in his noisy story to create the concept of a trust. However, the first testamentary trust, through a deed and a will, creating a deceased estate, was created by Pope Nicholas V with this papal bull, the deceased estate. We're going to get into that big time. This was only one of 3 papal bulls to include the line with the incipit for a perpetual remembrance. So this papal bull had the effect of conveying the right of use of the land as real property from the express trust, the Unam Sanctum, to the control of the pontiff and his successors in perpetuity. So hence all land is claimed as crown land. And this created the real estate industry. The first crown is represented by the first Sesta KV trust, created when a child is born. depriving us of all beneficial entitlements and rights on the land. This was terminated June 12, 2011. So for 1455 to 2011, how many hundreds of years is that?
800?
So something like that. This same Pope wrote the Dum Diversas papal bull that gave him the right to create all humans as slaves, now that he owned all the land. June 21, 1481, the papal bull, the Attorney Regus, created the second crown of the Commonwealth. Attorney Regus means eternal crown. It was created by Pope Sixtus and is the second of 3 papal bulls as deeds of testamentary trusts. This papal bull created the crown of Aragon, later known as the crown of Spain, and is the highest sovereign and highest steward of all Roman slaves subject to the rule of the Roman pontiff. Spain lost the crown in 1604 when it was granted to King James of England by Pope Paul V after the successful passage of the Union of Crowns or Commonwealth. But in 1605, the false flag operation of the gunpowder plot lost the crown from England. And then in 1975, it was returned to the Spain and King Carlos I, where it remains to this day, except for this papal bull was terminated in August 15 of 2011. This second crown is represented by the second Sesta V trust created when the child is born and by the sale of this birth certificate as a bond to the private central bank of the nation, depriving us of ownership of our flesh and condemning us to perpetual servitude as a Roman person or slave. 1537, Pope Paul III issued the papal bull, the Convocation, and the third crown of the ecclesiastical see was created. During the reign of King Henry VIII of England, the Sesta V Act was created, deriving its power from this papal bull. With this act, they claim the soul of a baby or human via the baptismal certificate. So when a baptismal certificate is issued, they see the soul of the person having been gifted to this trust. This trust has been managed since 1815 by the Bar Associations. Bar, incidentally, means British Accreditation Registry. Every single lawyer worldwide belongs to the Bar Association, the British
I didn't know that. That's
Accreditation Registry. This third crown, also created by Paul III, also meant to open the Council of Trent, and it is the third and final testamentary deed and will of a testamentary trust set up for the claiming of all lost souls to the sea. The Venetians assisted in the creation of the first Sesta V Act of 1540 to use this papal bull as the basis of ecclesiastical authority of Henry VIII. So this crown was secretly granted to England in the collection for the collection and reaping of lost souls. The crown was lost in 1816 due to the deliberate bankruptcy of England and was granted to the Temple Bar, which became known as the Crown Bar, or simply the Crown. The Bar Association since have been responsible for administering the reaping of the souls of the lost and damned, including the registration and collection of baptismal certificates representing the souls collected by the Vatican and stored in its vaults. So why would you hire a lawyer for anything when he's reaping your soul, he or she?
mm-hmm.
Right? But we don't know this. This third crown is represented by the third Sesta V trust, created when the child is baptized. It is the parent's grant of the baptismal certificate or title to the soul of the soul to the church or registrar. Thus, without legal title over one's soul, we will be denied legal standing and will be treated as things, cargo without souls, upon which the bar is now legally able to enforce maritime law or the Uniform Commercial Code. This papal bull was terminated October 31, 2011. No one talks about these terminations. My guess is this is when the Sesta KV trust accounts were terminated and we were changed into public transmitting utilities. So these 4 trusts comprise the largest corporate conglomerate and interlocking trust directorate on Earth, with 4 administrative hubs operating as independent international city-states. These are the Vatican, Westminster or inner city London, Washington, D.C., and the United Nations. The trust conglomerate operates by providing services. 1, the postal, via postal districts and post offices. Legal services via the bar associations. Banking via the banking associations. Global and domestic police services. Medical and welfare services. Insurance, defense, and treaty alliance. So number 2 and 3, legal services and banking, are provided by Westminster or the inner city of London. Number 4 and 7 are operated out of Washington, D.C. and the UN. So the dance of public and private life begins 1492 to 1776. All these years, large commercial investment companies formed under royal privilege or corporation for the purpose of developing the land and resources of the Pope's world. The investors were so eager for new opportunities that investment districts were formed. So we had the Virginia Company and so forth, all those companies that came to the New World. The colonists came as members of the military, as wealthy adventurers, and most commonly as bondservants to serve their commercial sponsors. So for the better part of 2 centuries, England, France, Holland, and Spain fought over and claimed chunks of the entire American continent, as well as the islands and other continents. Throughout it all, the basic premise of the public military power was extended in support of the private commercial interests, and this remains the same. This arrangement continues unabated to this day. The, quote, government uses the military to support and promote commercial expansion, and the commercial expansion pays for the, quote, government and the military. However, the people who consume the goods that the commercial interests produce and those who provide the labor necessary are not part of the loop. Going back to the 1600s again, the colonists pretended that the land was vacant and open to claim. They discounted the natives because they weren't Christians. Later, the colonists tried to buy land from the natives, who told the colonists that they didn't own the land owned the Indians, the natives, and it couldn't be bought. Colonists ignored this and forced the Indians to accept gifts as payment, and then they concocted contracts of sale based on this practice. So America and every other nation we can think of is founded on lies and false claims. Buying and selling and taxing land is a con game. Because natives first tried to bring this fraud to attention, they were deemed enemies of the crown and subjected to genocide all over the world. In 1666, with the Great Fire of London, the authorities couldn't tell through the rubble for weeks and months who was dead and who was living, so they came up with the Sesta KV Act to subrogate the rights of men and women, meaning they declared all women and men dead and lost at sea, unless they presented themselves to the proper authority after 7 years to say they were alive. The city-state of London then took custody of everybody and their property into a trust. The city-state became the trustee or the husband, holding all titles to the people and property until a living soul comes to reclaim those titles. 1697 brought another act forth with the passport, the need for a passport with a P on it for pauper, or poor person. And in 1698, the Poor Act classed 98% of the world's population as poor. So since 1698, 98% of us have been classed as poor. Her silent presence is what all native Aboriginal people lived by, and they knew her silent presence to be sacred and that she belongs equally to all people. She requires Aini and stewarding, Great Mother, Holy Mother. This generation cannot destroy what is owed to the next 7 generations, and anyone who wastes resources or pollutes the world is viewed like a 2-year-old with a hammer, too ignorant to know better, dangerous, and needing guidance. That's what her silent presence knows. After the Second World War II, the victorious Allies declared everyone dead, mission whereabouts unknown, and the entire world was redefined as an occupied battlefield. I never knew this before. So since World War II, the entire world has been considered an occupied battlefield. This then allows them to salvage the estates of the dead, missing, and whereabouts unknown of all humans. Have we ever noticed that there has never been an ending to declared wars? This is for that exact reason. So how does this still affect us today, and how did we become enmeshed in this nonsense? One, by the Births, Deaths, and Marriages and Relationships Act of 1837. At this point, I need to point out that all of the things we all think are laws are not laws, they're only acts, because this is all a freaking stage.
Okay, I like it. Good for now.
The other way we become enmeshed in this is registrations, licenses, certifications, business forming, codes, uniform code, uniform commercial code, anything requiring a code enmeshes you in this stupidity. Social security number, by working their system, by having a job, which, since we love to make acronyms so much, job, the word job is the acronym that means just over broke, which means the intention with us having a job is for them to keep us just barely over broke. So we think we're living comfortably, but we're just barely over broke.
Any day you're broke. Any day you're...
Registering to vote is another way you get enmeshed in it. So the simple fact is that we were born, not birthed. And when we register a birth, we are registering a dead child. So hence, today is the day of my death. The anniversary, 56th anniversary of my death.
For the mesh, for the system.
Yeah. The word born is not in any legal dictionary. So there's two dictionaries that are used. We, the common people, use Webster's dictionary. The legal world uses Black's Law Dictionary or Boubier's Law Dictionary, and those are very interesting. Dictionaries to read. Since 1933, here in the U.S., women have been being pushed into hospitals to give birth. In fact, I know at one point it was illegal to give birth at home. Between 1933 and 1950, I think it became absolutely illegal, and midwives faced jail time.
And there's other ways of prosecution to them, right? Today, still.
Yeah.
Okay.
Birth
like
at home
is the ways to intimidate them.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have been pushed to go to the maternity ward, maternity being the state or condition of the mother. This is per Black's Law Dictionary. Her state is either legitimate or natural. Legitimate is the condition of a mother having given birth to legitimate children. Natural is the condition of her who has been given birth to illegitimate children. Maternity is certain while paternity is presumed. Ward then means domestic relations. So an infant is in the ward, in the maternity ward, is placed by authority of law under the care of a guardian. So when mother is ready to deliver, she's wheeled off to the delivery room to make a delivery like a courier, turning over legal title. She does some labor or work, the waters break, and the baby enters the birth canal, now placing us under maritime law, under the Bar Association, under Westminster, inner city of London. And when the baby crowns, they figured out the baby crowns face down, right? The baby comes out face down, facing the floor, so the baby isn't there to see its crown stolen. It's their justification. it is. But we've all fallen for it, hook, line, and sinker. The baby is born, the umbilical cord is clamped and cut, and so now we have a duality created. The Webster's dictionary says what's the word, but it consists of the whole thing, the placenta, the cord, and the birth of a baby. A live birth consists of all. But so how does an animal give birth? The baby's born, the cord remains attached until the mother chews it off, and later that's how goats are born, or the cord just naturally somehow detaches, and then after all the goat babies are born, the placenta is born. But we unnaturally clamp and cut the cord, so this creates a duality. The placenta, cord, and baby were one unit until clamped and cut. So the baby is born, and when the rest of the baby, the placenta and rest of the cord, comes out, it gets inspected for signs of life. Then since there are no signs of life, there's no beating heart, there's no limbs, right? It gets pronounced dead, a shipwreck, and the birth certificate is generated. And I know this to be true because when I was in nursing school, they made a big deal about inspecting the placenta. Big deal.
Mm-hmm. What did they say?
They said it was to make sure that it came out whole and complete so that there was no birth remains left in the woman because it would make her bleed to death.
I remember that because I read a whole book.
Yeah.
But so what's the meaning on that? What did they do that?
The placenta is inspected, it's declared dead, a shipwreck, and the birth certificate belongs to the placenta, not to you.
Okay.
This is also, you are the human that is born, the baby that is born is also then declared dead and lost at sea. Mm-hmm. So that's why I said today is the day of my death. Mm-hmm. I was declared dead and lost at sea 56 years ago.
Okay. Yeah.
The extra embryonic matter becomes a ward of the state. Mm-hmm. The extra embryonic matter being the placenta and the cord. And the baby is considered dead and abandoned, lost at sea since the placenta was left behind. It's all based on the placenta. All based on the placenta. This is why it became such a big deal for them to push natives into the hospital, because the natives always buried their placentas under it to belong to the land. Okay. So the paperwork is given for the registration, is given to the mother. She gives her maiden name and dad provides his name. And this form gets lodged with the registrar of births, deaths, and marriages. And this is the source document, the first part of the Trinity, the Father. And this is where we're going into the Catholic and all Christian doctrine of the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. Mom and dad then request a copy. And this is the second part of the Trinity, the Son. This act of requesting a copy, the parents requesting a copy of the birth certificate, creates an LLC in the baby's name, and that LLC is a citizenship.
Look at that word, yeah. Citizenship.
Right. Mom and dad receive a birth certificate, which is a receipt of the trust set up for the placenta. Mm-hmm. That was declared dead, and it has to be a trust because remember in the first trust, the Unum Sanctum, set up this for the dead, the estate of the dead, the will and deed of, right, a deceased estate. But the placenta is deceased, so therefore the trust needed to be created. And the child is dead and lost at sea. And this is a third part of the Trinity, the Holy Ghost. The birth certificate is printed on security paper with the agent filling out the backside in the correct manner so it can be floated in the money markets. They create the fictional character, the straw man, and got us, the living beings, to become slaves, taking on the debts of a fictional character that doesn't even exist. And this birth certificate fraud is worldwide. So you've just been born and you've been deliberately misidentified as a person of unknown origin, an abandoned illegitimate child. So the forces that have been illegally occupying your country claim that you are one of theirs, a ward of state, a subject of their king or queen. So having a birth certificate means that you are a property of the state or crown and that you are a commodity to be bought and sold and a resource to be exploited. Why does every corporation have a human resources department? So next, under the provisions of the Buck Act and the Miller Act, which make outrageous claims to own you and to own the benefit of your labor, they sell this citizenship that they created and named after you to the Pope. The Pope then takes over as the manager of your estate for the benefit of themselves. And to guarantee that your estate isn't harmed, the Pope pays the king or queen a bond in gold equal to your birth weight. So the queen gives the Pope a title to you and your assets known as a clearinghouse birth certificate, allowing him to do all this in exchange for a share of the take. And their intent is to keep us all in a job just over broke our entire lives. And as they raise the minimum wage, they got to have inflation to raise their prices for no reason, to keep us just over broke. And if you think about it, anyone that's a billionaire, a millionaire, they're all still living just over broke, because to maintain that status now, they've got to pay $6,500 for a dress and $10,000 for a plate of dinner, and right. So they're all still living at,
invested, so they have no money.
yeah. So they're all still living at just over broke because they all are working a job still.
Mm-hmm.
So the entire banking system is based on this fiction of the placenta being declared dead with the deceased will. In fact, our placentas are our first deposit into the Federal Reserve System. And the placentas are actually are burned, but as are all limbs and stuff, live things taken off people in surgery. They get burned, they get cremated. But so the entire banking system holds everybody accountable as the sureties for this deceased estate. And that's why all of our credit cards, our driver's license, everything, all our legal documents are all in capital letters, because it's a citizenship C on the C of maritime.
Capitalized.
Yes. So we all conduct, thanks to this fraud, we all conduct every part of our lives under the Lex Mercatoria, which is now known as the Uniform Commercial Code, as a public corporate entity, bought and sold on the stock market. So let's look at the merchant law trinity now. So we have the king at the corner of a triangle, the king's hand, and the subjects. The king interfaces with his subjects through his hands. The hand is connected to the body, so it's an expression of the will. So there was a person, though, that was appointed as the hand of the king, who was the second most powerful man in the kingdom, doing the king's will. Merchant law is the court of commerce. The king's land has its own laws, so he would invite vendors to set up their tents on his land. This land has its own system of law, the king's law, but within that merchant's tent, the merchants created their Lex Mercatoria, which was the way to codify the way they'd all been conducting business, trades, right? Codify, code. So another way, there's no one else has introduced this, but I fully believe wholeheartedly that another way we get enmeshed into this, we're already enmeshed, But we get more enmeshed every time we go to the doctor and get a diagnosis, which is coded. Every time we go to the dentist, everything is coded.
Mhm.
So these tents, so this was pretty incredible to me. So you have this Kingsland, you have this tent, right? He invites the vendors to set up tents. Now what have we done in the US? We repeat things over and over again so freaking blindly, and I can't get pissed at anybody else because I was that blind myself until just a couple of years ago. We still set up tents. We get invited to set up tents to sell our wares. It's like, but we don't understand. We still allow ourselves to fall under this stupid lex mercatoria when we could make our own system. But no, we allow ourselves to fall under this stupidity. So the merchants created their own system of justice, and this is what brought the Department of Justice to being. So now courthouses are justice centers. So when you walk into a courthouse, you leave the Kingsland, which is actually working. Our body is our Kingsland, right? We're the sovereign of our body. We give up our rights. Every time we step foot into that courthouse, we no longer have any rights. We think we're going there to get our rights. No, we just give them all away. When that man or woman in black robes walks into the room and the officer says, "All rise," you are giving consent to their private system over your self-sovereignty. As of 1862, in the Constitution of the United States, a person was redefined to be a corporate status. In 1864, they defined the state to be a District of Columbia. So any country that has a constitution has defined a person as a corporate status. They are all part of it. You are born as part of Great Mother. You don't need a constitution to give you rights. We don't need a constitution to give us rights. We have them just by being born.
You say that's a crucial thing to understand in order to change anything in this world for the better.
Right.
So,
yeah. In 1864, they defined the state to be the District of Columbia and put all persons, corporations inside the District of Columbia through the 14th Amendment. So in 1870, the Department of Justice was put in place to oversee this fictitious commercial system. If your country has a constitution, you are part of this system. So in our corporate public life, our trinity is ourself, the sovereign living man or woman. The king's hand is our executor or our signature on forms who deals with the persons which are not live. The person is not a living entity, it's the dead person. So we're tricked into believing that we need a third party to speak for us, to contract with us in the Lex Mercatoria UCC. We've been led into believing we need forms and contracts and everything that places us deeper and deeper into their system. So we're going to leave that there and shift gears here.
Okay. Another subject?
No, well, it's kind of leads into this to get us to freedom, right? Because we're if you haven't figured it out by now, we're not free. I mean, I know you have, Julian, but for whoever's listening, there's nobody free. We all think we are.
I don't consider myself 100%.
So, I mean,
we're getting there.
So we'll get to this, but let's listen to this story first. There's an old woman's teaching tale about the plight of the starved feral man or woman. The word feral derives from the Latin word fer, meaning wild beast. In common usage, a feral creature is one who was wild, then domesticated, and has reverted back to a natural or untamed state again. So the feral woman or feral man is one who is once in a natural psychic state, that is our rightful wild mind, as a child, but became overly domesticated and deadened in proper instincts and so much more. So this story is known mostly by the devil's dancing shoes, or sometimes the red hot shoes of the devil, or just simply the red shoes. A wise old woman would start this story by saying, "Look at your shoes and be thankful they are plain, for one has to live very carefully if one's shoes are too red." Once upon a time, there was a poor motherless child who had no shoes. But the child, as she worked and walked about the land, saved scraps of cloth and whatever else she thought she could use to make herself shoes. And over time, she made herself a pair of red shoes. They were crude, but she loved them because they made her feel rich, even though her days were spent gathering food in the thorny woods until far past dark. One day, as she trudged down the road in her rags and her red shoes, a gilded carriage pulled up beside her. Inside was an old woman who told her she was going to take her home and treat her as her own daughter. So to the wealthy woman's house they went, where the child was bathed and her hair cleaned and combed. She was given pure white undergarments and a fine wool dress and white stockings and shiny black shoes. When the child asked after her old clothes, and especially her red shoes, the old woman said they were so filthy and the shoes so ridiculous that she had thrown them into the fire, where they were burned to ashes. The child was very sad, for even with all the riches surrounding her, the humble red shoes made by her own hand had given her the greatest happiness. Now she was made to sit still all the time, to walk without skipping, and to not speak unless spoken to. So a secret fire began to burn in her heart as she yearned for her red shoes, her old red shoes, more than anything. So I'm going to stop here with the story. It goes on long and long, long, but I'm going to stop here because we need to talk about the symbolism. This is the freedom. This is where we come to freedom. The handmade red shoes as the symbol of a handmade life. The loss of the handmade red shoes represents the loss of a woman or man's self-designed life of passionate vitality and the taking on of a too tame life. The child fashioned these shoes herself, and they made her feel very rich in her own special way. She was poor in money, but rich in innovativeness and creativity. So the handmade shoes are marks of her rising out of a small existence into a passionate life of her own design. Socially, shoes send a signal, a way of recognizing one type of person from another. This archetypal symbolism of the shoe goes back to ancient times when shoes were a mark of authority. Rulers had them, slaves didn't. We have a saying here in America, I don't know if it's elsewhere in the world, about being well-heeled, meaning the heels of your shoes. All goes to the shoes. If you're well-heeled, if you're wealthy. If you're well-educated, you're well-heeled.
Why dress shoes men have heels, higher heels.
Right. Red is the color of life and also sacrifice. To live a vibrant life, there are sacrifices we must make, and those sacrifices are giving up being part of the system. If you want to create, superficiality must be sacrificed, even security, and often maybe a desire to be liked, so that you can draw up your most intense insights, your most far-reaching visions. Problems arise where there is too much sacrifice with no life forthcoming from it all. Then red is the color of blood loss rather than blood life. One sort of vibrant and beloved red, this vibrant and beloved red is lost when the child's handmade red shoes are burned. And this sets up a yearning, an obsession, and finally an addiction for the other kind of red. So in the story, she became old enough to be confirmed in the confirmation in the Catholic Church, right? And so the old lady took her to get shoes made, and the cobbler incidentally made her a pair of bright, shiny red shoes, which she loved, but they led to her death. So the other kind of red, the one of cheap thrills, sex without soul, a life without meaning, the life of the job, just over broke. If well enough is left alone, the child, delighted by her handiwork, would make another pair of shoes and another until they're not so crude. She will progress and beyond the wonderful display of ingenuity and thriving in difficult circumstance, the shining fact for her is that these shoes she has made cause her enormous joy, and joy is the life's blood, spirit food, soul life, all in one. It is the kind of joy we feel when we look at the people we love enjoying themselves. It's the kind of joy we feel when we've done something that we feel intensely about. So the old woman, rather than dignifying the nude, allows the senescent attitude to destroy innovation. Rather than mentoring her ward, the old woman will attempt to calcify her. The old woman in this tale is not a sage or a mystic, but is rather dedicated to the repetition of a single value without experimentation of renewal. To follow such a lifeless value system causes loss of soul linkage in the extreme. So a culture that authentically promotes individual development can never have a slave class of any group or gender. It's freedom. Too much domestication breeds out strong and basic impulses to play, relate, cope, rove, commune, and so forth. No play equals no creative life. Too much domestication is like forbidding the vital essence to dance. So in its proper and healthy state, the wild self is not docile or vacuous. It is alert and responsive to any given movement or moment. It is not locked into an absolute and repetitive pattern for any and all circumstances. It has creative choice. But the instinct injured human, which we all are, has no choice. They just stay stuck. And that's getting out of our stuckness is one of the ways of repairing our instincts. One of the most insidious attacks on the wild self is to be directed to perform properly, and applying a reward, pay will follow, if ever. So the wildish human, which we all are, can pretend to live an ordinary life, which we were all born to be wildish, our natural wild selves. We can live an ordinary life, this dry, cruel life of the slave system that we're all part of, while gritting his or her teeth, but there's always a price to pay. The pretending to live this ordinary life is normalizing the abnormal. This system is abnormal. I mean, think about it. Declaring the placenta dead, creating a birth and a shipwreck, creating a birth certificate for it so there can be a deceased will estate to be governed. Is that normal? No, absolutely not. It's not natural, it's not normal. So we normalize the abnormal. And this dry and perfectionistic value system is devoid of the ability to see at all. So the more we live in it, the why does our eyesight diminish? Because we're part of this stupidity. Normalizing the abnormal causes our spirits, which would normally leap to correct the situation, to instead sink into complacency and blindness, literally. So if we cringe before the collective and acquiesce to pressures for mindless conformity, we may be protected from exile, but we treacherously endanger our wildish lives. And sometimes the only alternative to cringing before a parched collective is to commit an act drenched in courage. What would some of those acts be? It starts with going, I believe this, and saying, what do I do? Well, every step of how do I stop purchasing? How do I stop buying? How do I stop registering? Stop seeking registration, certification, stop voting, stop. Okay. Those are all acts drenched in courage. Stop making payments on credit cards.
Mm-hmm.
The wild, because of its energy and beauty, is always eyed by somebody or other, or something or other, some group or others for trophy purposes, or as a thing to be reduced, altered, ruled on, murdered, redesigned, or controlled. There is such a loss of meaning when one gives up the life made by hand. And this was the time when women, life made by hand was the time when men and women lived in equality, cooperatively working together. So when one gives up the life made by hand, all manner of injuries to psyche, nature, culture, family, and so forth are allowed to occur. Injury to instinct, normalizing the abnormal, is what has allowed us to bring forth the world we just talked about, the world of slavery that we live in. When our instincts are injured, we normalize assault after assault, acts of injustice and destruction toward ourselves, our loved ones, our Mother Earth. We normalize a dry, cruel life every day that we continue to participate in the slavery system. As we allow our wildish instincts to be healed, we return to this handmade life, the holy, mindful life where we remake our own shoes, walk our talk our own talk. And our wildish human is by nature intense and talented. The handmade life, the one carefully and mindfully crafted by us every day, outside of the system, outside of the box. Now, this has been 800 years, we decided, right? When the papal bulls first created the trusts. So for years, people were figuring this out, and there was a point, the birth certificate was given a CUSIP number, and you could look it up and see how much your bond was worth, your birth certificate was worth. It was in the billions of dollars, and people were cashing in as beneficiaries of that. And that's when I believe those papal bulls were terminated in 2011 and this is, no one talks about that termination and what it means. I believe that is when they terminated those Sestake trust accounts, so that most people who teach this are teaching you this so that you can access those accounts and get lots of money. There is no more money to be accessed, because in 2011 those trust accounts were, with the termination of the papal bulls, gone. No more trust accounts. We were just made into public transmitting utilities. So therefore, what does that mean? That means when you go to the bank to get a loan, when you go anywhere to get a car loan, to get whatever, you give them a piece of paper with your signature on it. If it has a blank site, they're turning it over and they're writing a promissory note and creating money with your signature. That's a public transmitting utility. So how do we get out of it? There's a process we can follow to announce to them that we're not part of that anymore. I think the biggest part, they don't pay attention. The biggest part is just to say, I want to exit this and this is what Owl Freedom Dojo is all about. Living a handmade, self-governed life outside of the system, where we don't need to pay taxes, we don't need car registrations, we make all our own things, we don't need central banks, we don't need,
and also we shouldn't need the industrial paradigm to live.
Right.
That's something I want to point out, because I know people that are familiar with this, everything you've talked about here, and would 100% agree with you, and I want to get out of that as well. But then their minds don't go as far as realizing that part of that system is also the whole consumerist paradigm, where I get to, anything I need, I buy, because then I only focus on my work. I have one field of work. I'm really fragmented because I'm ignorant about anything else that is not within my very thin line of work. So those people are, they're thinking that they're going to get, because they're exiting this and they're accessing they're learning about the law of attraction or whatever.
Right.
You're going to get money somewhere. and that's being free, or they're going to become a business owners. And
well, that's, we have this big thing, this big push. Everyone wants to be financially free. That's why the title of tonight is There Is No Freedom, is either all or nothing. You can't be financially free while while selling yourself as a, right?
or just hoping to, or just thinking that by doing the symbolism and doing the esoteric work of getting out of this system is enough. You also have to produce your food, you have to make your things, you have to see to the land, you have to see that you actually get out of that whole mindset of
Well,
and
it takes, like, I've talked to some people about this, and they just don't understand. It's like, well, but but when you sign the mortgage, which was illegal, I mean, that's because we're slaves. All those benefits we were supposed to be given free. Everything was supposed to be, because that's what the plantation owner does, right? They provide the housing and everything for the slave. But no, they can make more money by making us purchase things, but we're dead. We can't own a house. So here's the other thing. As soon as the mortgage is registered, as soon as you register your vehicle, we wonder why child here in the United States, why Child Protective Services can walk in and take your child at any time. It's because the word parent in the law dictionary is spelled P-A-I-R, rent. It's a pair of people renting the kid from Child Protective Services, because remember, the kid is dead and lost at sea. So therefore, it's a ward of the state. The placenta is the ward of the state, but they made the living child be the stand-in for the, right? The registration of the vehicle is the same thing. You're allowed to rent it. So we make all these payments thinking we're paying off our mortgage, thinking, no. So you can't become debt free and there's no such thing as debt free while you're working a job of just over broke. There's no such thing as, if freedom is either all or nothing, and we think we're free and we're not.
Okay, so is this going somewhere?
Yeah, I mean, we also have to realize, like today I was supposed to be in court. At first it kind of scared me, and it finally fully came to me. This has nothing to do with Ingrid Lorna, the living person. It is, the judge is the banker, and there has to be an exchange of money. That's all. Court is not about justice. It's about an exchange of money, and it's an exchange of money between it has nothing to do with Ingrid Lorna, the living person. And this is, first of all, how we bridge the gap between getting out of this box they've put us in, is understanding that anything we do involves that straw man. It has nothing to do with the living person. That is separate. And so then understanding that you don't need a license to do business. The Holy Mother never asked you to get a license to do business.
Well, let me mention
things like that.
That it seems simple. I mean, you learn about this, and then it would be just logic to say, okay, then I'm not going to comply. But there's this irrational fear that comes to people, and I've seen it. For example, when I decided to stop paying my credit cards, and then get more credit cards and use all that credit, and just decide not to pay for it. For example, I saw my mom's reaction, so full of fear.
Yeah.
And even if you do understand that one thing is this commercial thing, and that there's no penal code, or there's no there's no way that you're really liable or that you're in danger in any way.
No,
right?
no.
But then you are, because you believe in it, and because my
Right.
mom believes in it, and because anybody else believes in it, right?
Yeah.
People believe in it, and people act as if it was God's law. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, and then all these people that teach this, they're all diehard Christians, patriot Christians, so to speak, and they all talk about natural law. There is no natural law. That's why we went over the songs of the old ones. That's what guides us. There is no natural common law. That's all man, still man created.
Mhm.
You know, it's common sense. Some of it, no trespassing, don't, but that's so there's all these people that are studying this and trying to create this same old shit, different. They don't understand that freedom is either all or nothing. You don't create the same system with the same money, because the money is just a story. The money is just
And then also I've seen this. You get so you have to believe. I mean, believing in this and getting to know the Holy Mother. At first, while you still don't know her, you still don't have a relation with her. Still don't have, or you do, but you're just not as aware of it, or you don't cultivate it as you should. Then,
right.
then you all of a sudden you stop believing in all of these things, and you get to the point where, well, I need to believe in something, right? And since you still don't have this relationship with Holy Mother, then you don't see what to believe in, and you fall into believing in the same thing. Just let me give you the example with Charles Eisenstein. I was scrolling through. I just happened, just by curiosity, to follow Robert Kennedy Jr. and then I see this video in his Instagram of Charles Eisenstein saying he's going to go back into believing into in the electoral process. He now believes that the electoral process can guide us to freedom.
Charles
And
Eisenstein.
Charles Eisenstein did a recording dedicated to it's Robert Kennedy Jr. Is that maybe correct? Which, I mean, sure, it's the closest thing to an honest guy, but still, I've listened to him speak, and he's so far from understanding the whole
The
thing.
Kennedy family is the biggest part of the families that set up this system.
There you go. See? But there you go. He has to believe in something. Even if he was on the path, apparently, to economic sovereignty, he's going to vote, and he's telling people they should vote.
Well, so with this, I made the motion asterisk around the word government. There is no government. It's all private corporation. That's the other thing we don't understand, is there is no government. It is all private corporation. So the electoral process is bullshit. You're asking for a CEO of the company, not a president of anything.
And that's what he's not coming around to understanding.
Well, but he doesn't, Charles Eisenstein isn't aware of this. He hasn't been made aware of this. And maybe he has been, but it's just, I mean, when I first was made aware of it, it was just like, it made sense. I knew it was true, but it was just so much. I threw all the books away. Right? Can't.
Yeah, that's what happens. I mean, it's so hard to see where we're standing at. Really, I mean, it's just to actually focus on the time and space we're in, and what's so reality.
Yeah, and there's one new guy I just found that has studied and researched this, and he's like, he wants people to give up their birthday and say this mantra: all present and accounted for from fertilization until last breath, which means your life started when your father's sperm fertilized mama's ovum, right? That's when life started. And there's something to that, because that's 40 weeks from that point till we emerge face down and our crown gets stolen, right? Something, there's probably something symbolic with that 40 weeks. So he's like, anyone that, you know, per the system, anyone that celebrates their birthday is stupid and naive, and because it's your death day. But when you think about it, think about that this actually does give you freedom. So technically, we could all put an end to this. Okay, what's the first way to stop this? Home births. Give up the fear of something going wrong, because, and people might say with Aloha, I need adult cohabitation. DeHea says, well, you're trying to take us back to the Stone Age. Well, hello, how many hundreds of thousands of years have women and animals been giving birth the way they have? Has any of our progress changed the way we give birth, or has it shortened our pregnancies? Has it made any?
The illusion
So
of
are we not still living in the Stone Age, technically? Right? So stop.
And we have all the knowledge of all the experience and all the time that has
Stop with this unhealthy fear that something's going to be wrong, and allow your body to give birth the way it's going to give birth, and go with a home birth. Do not register your child. Demand they give you the placenta. If you're going to demand, you have that right. Do not leave the hospital. Demand that they give you the placenta. Or if you follow through with everything, then at the 7, your kid, you need to take your kid and do all this work to say, I'm alive. I'm not, right? I'm alive, present, and accounted for. I'm not dead and lost at sea anymore.
Mm-hmm. So there you go. So this is gonna continue, I bet.
We need to go more into goddess, the Holy Mother. I'm not sure I'm ready to put. There's so much. I'm not sure I'm quite ready to put. So let's talk about phenomenology next week.
Okay. Alrighty. Phenomenology. That's gonna be how we continue. But as you can see, folks, this is an ongoing thing, and if you want to bring depth into your life, then I suggest you take a look into the work we're doing at Aloha Nila Living.
Yeah.
So there's the invitation next week, 7 o'clock. I Need Living Conversations, 120th session.
Wow.
The phenomenology.
Phenomenology. Yep.
Alrighty. So this is phenomenal, and I guess with that, we say goodbye and have a great rest of your weekday, and we'll see you soon.
Yeah.
I'm gonna end the live stream now.